Hello, and this week we are going to focus on quality. Certain manufacturers immediately, just by the name of the manufacturer, give you an instant image of quality. Jaguar, Bentley, Rolls-Royce, cars of those ilk. And the same applies to the kit car industry. And this week we are going to focus on some real quality. Chancer was a British television drama that aired on ITV in 1990 and 1991. The series is best known for being the breakout role for actor Clive Owen, who starred as the titular Chancer. It ran for 20 episodes over 2 series and featured a stylish neo-noir approach to the financial free-for-all of the late 1980s. The story follows a clever but amoral city investment analyst named Stephen Crane, a pseudonym for his real identity, Derek Dex Love. In Series 1, after being fired from his investment bank, Crane gets involved with a struggling sports car manufacturer, Douglas Motors. He schemes to keep the company afloat, which draws him into a web of family drama with the owners. His shady past threatens to catch up with him throughout the season. Following his release from prison, Love, in Series 2, now using his real name, is drawn back into the world of fraud and forgery. He must protect an orphaned child, Joseph, and tries to save a family estate belonging to his old rival, Piers Garfield Ward, from a ruthless industrialist. The lead character was played by Clive Owen, playing Stephen Crane and Derek Dex Love, both pseudonyms of the same character, of course. Leslie Phillips appears in the first series as Crane's former boss in a beautifully camp portrayal. Peter Vaughan plays the antagonist Tom Franklin in the second series. Other notable actors included Susanna Harker, Simon Shepherd, and Christopher Eccleston, who made an early career appearance in the second series. The series was produced by Central TV for ITV, and the theme music was written by Jan Hammer, known for his work on Miami Vice. Chancer was a critical success during its initial run, although production may have seemed dated by modern standards. It is praised for its strong writing and acting. The show served as a major career milestone for Clive Owen, helping him transition into a successful film career. Of course, so far as we're concerned, the real star of the show was the Douglas Leopard, which was in fact a JBA Falcon 2+2. The Douglas Leopard sports car at the centre of the first series of Chancer was a fictional name for the JBA Falcon 2+2, the kit car produced by JBA Engineering Limited. So how did the production company find the JBA Falcon? Well, finding a distinctive car for the show's storyline, which was centred on a fictional Douglas Motors, many believed inspired by Morgan, a struggling sports manufacturer requiring a vehicle that was both visually interesting and somewhat obscure to the general public. To scout for such a car, the producers were likely looking for a car with a classic neo-retro aesthetic that still fits into the late 1980s setting. A mass-produced car would not have worked for the plot, which features a struggling specialist manufacturer. You can understand why Morgan might not have wanted to be involved, especially the sexual shenanigans that Clive Owen's character got up to with the owner's daughters. The classically styled JBA Falcon fit this requirement perfectly. It is highly probable that the production company, Central Independent Television, contacted established kit car manufacturers to find a suitable model. JBA Engineering was a well-regarded and long-standing player in the British kit car scene, making it a logical choice. A common practice for TV and film production is to approach manufacturers directly. Producers would have contacted JBA Engineering to discuss licensing the use of the Falcon for the series and to source vehicles needed for filming. This would also have ensured that any necessary parts or technical support could be provided directly by the manufacturer. JBA provided actual cars for the filming. It's also said that the Owners Club were heavily involved as well, providing part completed or completed cars to be strewn around the fictional factory. So you could say it is definitely a product of both the Owners Club and the JBA Engineering that the cars were available for the production. In fact, it is an item of extreme pride for the JBA Owners Club, quite rightly, that their car and their involvement helped to make the Chancer TV series. Now, if ever it proved the importance of having an industry and apprenticeships and the skills that you pick up through working in the car industry, and I count myself amongst this, I learnt on a shop floor, I was given skills, and I have built a career out of it. Not always in the car industry, but by being in the car industry, I learnt those skills. I think a really good advert for that is the next feature. Steve Hull tells you the story of John Barlow.
Anyway, straight in, let's not muck around. I've got a lot to get in on this one. The subject matter is a well-deserving one for a video in the series. I regard him as a design genius, really, and a really nice bloke to boot. But there's a lot to his career, and I need to get it in. I'm told I've got to try and aim for less than 30 minutes. So here we go. John Barlow is the man concerned. Most people, I guess, will know him for his involvement with the Royale Motor Company, who haven't actually existed since about 2001, I don't believe. But anyway, lots of people will know him for his massive contribution to the kit car industry, the 3 models they produced, which we'll talk about. Some people will know him only for JBA. More people probably won't realise of his association with JBA and the Falcon. Indeed, he created the Falcon, another great kit car. Indeed, John was the B of JBA. And of course, all the stuff he's done subsequent to that. So let's go straight back to the beginning. John's career goes right back. When he was just 15, he was taken on as a craft apprentice at Leyland Motors, which was the bus and truck division of British Leyland, and they were based in the town Leyland in Lancashire. And John is a Lancastrian. 5-year course it was, and he also, I think he went on day release to Bolton Technical College as well. Apprenticeship was completed in 1977 when I guess he was 22. Although forgive me, John, I know he'll be aware, he will become aware of this video. And I also know, knowing John like I do, he'll hate this video because, as he said, and he always liked being in reading kit car magazines, but he didn't like being in them. But I'm sorry, mate, this is well deserving. So you're going to have to suck this one up, as they say. Whoever that is, I don't know who that is, but that's what I've heard anyway. So he was when he finished that first apprenticeship, he was awarded Apprentice of the Year. So clearly, Leyland Motors liked him a lot, suitably impressed. He also got a second a technical apprenticeship this time. That was in 1978, which included a year on the shop floor, which not only meant that he was well versed in terms of the theory, and clearly a very talented young lad, but that invaluable year on the shop floor gave him taught him the ropes really, so he knew what was involved in turning his theory into reality. So that, I think he said, that really stood him in good stead. After that apprenticeship, he was, I think he told me that the design office, drawing office, was kind of the holy grail, and he got one of those treasured posts, and that's when he first met Ken Jones and Dave Ashley, the A and J, or rather the J and A of JBA, two great guys. They'll crop up again quite shortly, very shortly, and of course I realise now I realise that these videos aren't listened to or don't appear in chronological order. I couldn't get my head around that. There's lots of things I still can't about this modern interweb malarkey. But there is out there, and you will search and you will find a history file series on JBA, another well-deserving subject. John had also, by this stage, he was, as well as being a specialist car enthusiast, an avid reader of Philby's jottings in Hot Car. I think he called them kit snips, and that's when John said that he likes reading kit car magazines, but he doesn't like being in them. But suitably inspired, John built his own special. I think he fabricated his own chassis, used Triumph Herald running gear, I think. Although the engine came from a Pinto, came from a full Capri, an old Capri that donated its Pinto engine. I'm not sure, I can't remember if that special ever got completed. Although they certainly, around about that time, the three protagonists, I think John had said to them that he reckoned he could design a traditional roadster that could give them a living, which actually was put to the test very soon after, because in the late 70s, early 80s, the three were made redundant, and that kind of was a force majeure, and they were kind of forced really to put their money where their mouths were and come up with a full-time business called JBA Engineering. And that first kit car that they produced was the Falcon Roadster, which, as you'll find in the JBA voiceover, there were several variants of the Falcon, but John designed the first one, and the one that put them on the kit car roadmap, so to speak. Over 2,000 units were sold of that car. Again, John hated the attention that the JBA and the Falcon brought to the little company from Standish near Wigan. Local TV stations in the area were, I think, regularly did features on the little success story. What was the town of Standish's little success story. But anyway, after a year or so, John flew the Falcon's nest. He left Dave and Ken to continue running that company until 2004, when they decided they wanted to retire. But meanwhile, John and his wife Anne set up a little company called Top Form Engineering in Bamber Bridge. I think it's a suburb of Preston, or it's near Preston, I don't know. Forgive me, people of Preston and Bamber Bridge. At that time, in the early 80s, XJ6 tuning and body conversions were, I wouldn't say all the rage, but they were certainly very popular. And that's what Top Form Engineering did. They restored XJ6s and also sold various GRP parts for the big Jag. I think boot spoilers, side skirts, front splitters, rear diffusers, that sort of thing. John would advertise his wares in a pre-internet age in the marvellous Exchange and Mart. Thursdays were Exchange and Mart day, unless of course you knew, like I did, a couple of guys that were aware of the depot that the Thursday copies were being delivered to or distributed from, and would wait outside and get an early copy on a Wednesday night. So if you ever phoned up at 7 o'clock in the morning for a bargain that you thought, that's mine, and you only to be told that it sold, and you couldn't quite work out how it had sold because it had only come out that morning, my mate Trevor is the reason. or could have been the reason, but I think there was lots of Trevors who knew that ruse. Anyway, top form engineering were doing very nicely, but John was always into his sort of vintage style vehicles, and it wasn't long before top form engineering evolved into Royale Motor Company, trading from the same address in Bamber Bridge. John's liking of the XJ6 would prove significant, as the first Royale model was the brilliant XJ6 based drop head, and it certainly gave design sort of clues to John's future direction. Lots of vintage Bentley inspiration, which he was a fan of vintage Bentleys, and also a big fan of classic British coach builders such as Mulliner, Park Ward, Van den Plas. And before someone pipes up that Van den Plas was a Belgian company, that is very true, but there was I don't know if it's an autonomous British division, but it was certainly sort of, I guess, a standalone operation in the UK. Drophead wasn't intended as a wedding hire vehicle, but it certainly found its niche in that market. One thing I've noticed about the Drophead, beautiful, elegant car. Not bad for a first effort, you have to say. The people that bought them seem to still have them. It's one of those cars that is a keeper. I've noticed that, and I've talked to quite a few owners over the years that actually built them back then in the early 80s, and sort of nearly 40 odd years later, 45 years later, they still have those cars. They treasure them, which is brilliant, really. They certainly were built by people who liked the concept for what it was. And I think John and Anne sold quite a few drop heads overseas. I know that one or two went to Cyprus, Malta, Italy and Spain. I think fully built examples when they were launched, fully built, was from 20 grand, which for what you got was a lot of car, really. It has to be said that the advent of SVA, now for those I've always have to sort of bear in mind, and I've always said that I'll try if I can remember, I've explained various times the differences between GRP, glass fibre, and the reasons why we don't use fiberglass unless we can help it, all being the same thing of course, but so I try and I have to remember that not everybody is an expert. Certainly Mr. A and other who turned up looking for a tenon mortise joints, tenon joints video, he won't probably be aware of those cues. So let's talk about that. So SVA arrived in 1998. It was a government test. I guess I've heard it described as an MOT on steroids. Up until that point, you could build a kit car, put it together. Most people do a lovely job. Some people were nailing cars together and maybe not having very much success with what they produced, and the government were keen to keep death traps off the road, which is fair enough. Perceived as being the voice of doom for the industry, it was anything but, really, and it wasn't long before manufacturers made their kits compliant. Some were not able to be made compliant, certainly not with a financial sort of thought behind it, and the drop head was one such. SVA soon evolved into IVA, which is still in existence today, but it's pretty much the same thing. I think SVA stood for single vehicle approval. It was widened, its scope was widened slightly, and it became individual vehicle approval, and we still have that today. Anyway, John was kind of on it really, and he was aware that was coming, but we'll come to that actually, because we're getting ahead of ourselves. Between then and between the launch of the drop head and the arrival of SVA in 1998, 1994 saw what I think is one of his greatest ever designs, the Sabre. Absolutely fantastic car. I definitely say it's a lot bigger than the BMW 328 from the 30s, but I think there was definitely the sort of cues from that car. I think De La Haye, and I'm gonna, again, forgive me because I'm going to butcher pronunciation in a minute. But the Delahaye 135 MS, oh here we go, Guilore Roadster. I've seen a picture of that car, and it's a beautiful thing, and there's certainly elements of that with flying wings and such like. Not a replica, but it has to be said, John is a paid up fan of the work of 30s and 40s coach builders. He told me at the time, did a feature, and I remember I've got the quote here, he wanted to create a more sporting car but still vintage in style, and crucially one that was easier to build and more affordable. And I think he achieved all of those aims really. Change of donor, the Jaguar was left behind, and he moved over to Ford Sierra, which was kind of the kid on the block then as donor vehicles in that period. In the mid 90s, it took over from Cortina, if for that sort of donor vehicle. You could also use the full Granada as well if you so wished. Certainly the Sabre appealed to a slightly different market and definitely introduced a new audience and brought much sort of wider publicity to the Royale Motor Company, deservedly so as well. Unfortunately, it's had a real troubled existence. You look at the Sabre, and I've seen some absolutely stunning examples, and you think, well, that's going to sort of still be available. Unfortunately, that's not the case. It just, for whatever reason, it didn't stand the test of time. And it's, anyway, moving on. I think the German agent they had for a time managed to get the car through the daunting TÜV TÜV test in Germany, which meant that it's a very hard test to achieve compliance with. But once you get it, you can sell fully built versions on the German market, and what's more, you can issue a 12-month Ford. Well, he was able to offer a full 12-month Ford warranty on parts on the car. Excuse me, a swig of water there. But John wanted a second model after he realised that the drop head was not going to be a success as far as SVA, or not a viable success anyway. So enter in 1998 the marvellous Windsor, a very stately looking car. Had a Laundelette rear section, which was ideal to help it with its intended wedding hire market. I do recall, I just need to check slightly there, I remember I had a sub-editor a few years ago, and I did write the word Laundelette, or Landelette, and the person concerned, bless her, was sure that I meant laundrette, and changed it at the last minute to laundrette, which was quite embarrassing when I was talking about a car with the Laundelette body style, and I ended up with laundrette written. But there you go. Again, this one was based on Granada, or you could use the top spec, the Scorpio V6 version. And it certainly looked like a Daimler limo as far as I'm concerned, the type that sort of mayors up and down the UK used to waft along to various civic functions in. And John said of the Windsor, in hindsight, he thought the quality was almost too high, meaning it was quite expensive, or certainly perceived as expensive. And he admits it was a complicated build, but and the wedding hire market has a high sort of price point. He's always sort of stuck by that, from a car sort of being acceptable to becoming too expensive. And I think the Windsor was maybe, unfortunately, a bit expensive for them. It was well received. There's no two ways about it. The Windsor was very well received. I remember the car's launch at Newark at the Alternative Kitcar show, or Alternative Car Show in 1998, and Royale stand was busy all weekend with people eager to see that new vehicle from them. But by late 2000, John decided that Royale sales had begun to tail off, and he could see that it was time to change direction. He's always done that. He's always had the ability and the bravery, I think, to realise that sales were tailing off, and he needed to change direction, and that's what he did. he left the kit car scene for a while at that time, and he concentrated on buying and selling property. Although it wasn't away for long, and it wasn't long before he got the inevitable sort of itch to build cars again. But 2002 he returned, and it showed really. I think he was away after about 18 months he was away for. But it really proved the versatility of Barlow. If he was going to get typecast with sort of vintage type or veteran, classic type vehicles, the Veranti Coupe proved that he could design a modern car, and how. It was incredibly well received. I got wind, in fact, a customer of John, for a Sabre customer, a guy that lived near me and was quite close to John, was aware that he was working on something, and he tipped me off a few months before and told me that he would check with John and would tell me when it was okay to contact him, and indeed what happened was John contacted me before that, told me he was working on something and would I like to go and see it. So I remember travelling up to a freezing cold Wigan on a foggy day a couple of days before Christmas, eager to get the exclusive on that car, and I was blown away by it. It was based on MR2, which was sort of fair game in those days, as lots of cars were. Most of them were of an exotic replica type. John wasn't into replicas, and he wanted to prove that you could use an MR2, but for an original design, and he achieved that. And he later created a convertible version as well. Hit the market hard and very well received. And again, I guess by sort of 2003, 2004, I think he did over 100 Veranti kits. He wasn't doing fully built as far as I'm aware, maybe one or two, but certainly most of those went out as kits. I think the lure of the vintage style vehicle was too much, and he started a new operation called Regent Motor Company in 2006. I think he felt he had unfinished business with that market, and he wanted to design a specific model for the wedding hire market, one that looked the part but was attractive enough to gain sales. Again, it was laundrette style, but more visually, I guess, inspired by a Model A Ford 1928-31. But I had a longer wheelbase than that, but it was beautifully built, typical Barlow. There was no surprises in its quality and its execution. I think John told me, I know because he told me, he was having trouble finding a suitable donor, one that was current but one that was suitable for the purpose and up to the job. And one day, I think by accident, he noticed an abundance of old, at that time, FX4 taxis, London taxis. Did some digging, and he discovered that, massively sturdy chassis, but after years of hard service, sort of plying their trade in London, central London, the bodies were rotted for fun, he reckoned, and the interiors were understandably quite ratty because they'd had lots of bums on seats. But its potential as a donor was John couldn't sort of look beyond that really. As he said, it was ideal, and he wanted to use an unmodified floor pan for what he wanted, as it was at that time IVA exempt. But the elephant in the room was the diesel engine, and lots of people told him that the diesel engine would put people off. But he needn't have worried, because of the 250 of those Regents he sold, John reckoned that only one of those customers wanted a petrol engine, so that worked. Proved the concept quite nicely, really. I'm not sure. John was doing really nicely with the Regent Tourer, as it was known, and I don't think he was actively looking for an exit on that one at that time. But the brakes came on, or the wheels fell off, when John suffered a massive heart attack in 2007. He told me that he actually died twice. He had the jump pack put on him a couple of times, but typically once he did recover, and thankfully he did, John being John, he was itching to leave hospital. He got read the riot act by his consultant, and he was told in no uncertain terms what would happen or what could happen if he didn't take things easily. or more easy. So he's decided to sell the Regent Motor Company to Merseyside-based, I think, Caremore Cars, who was run, I think, by now, it tested my brain, my memory here, Francis Richards and his business partner, David. Excuse me, I think David. I can't remember his surname, forgive me, Cleaton. Where did that come from? Well, there you go. I think they carried on until about 2014 selling Regents, actually. Anyway, John went on a bit of a fitness regime. He kept his doctor happy, and reckoned he was feeling as fit as a fiddle by 2009, which, and you know where this is going, don't you? He entered the Imperial Motor Company. It looked quite similar, and certainly was similar in style and intent to the Regent. More influenced by the 20s style rather than the 30s, I'm guessing, and it was deliberately made easier to build. At this time, still based in Wigan, in a larger premises in Wigan, John went into partnership with a car builder and a coach builder, I guess, called Dave Chapman, who'd been involved with the kit car industry several years before, when he and his then business partner, Rick Edwards, were behind a company called Tritech Autocraft, and they were producing Messerschmitt and Isetta bubble car replicas and doing very nicely with them too. And certainly Dave helped take a lot of workload from John, and the partnership worked quite well for several years. I think they offered more body styles with the Imperial than they did with the Regent, or John did with the Regent. There was definitely a long wheelbase limo with a proper limousine type divider, I suppose a taxi divider, between the front and the rear passengers. I think there was even a hearse version of that. Certainly he seemed to be on the right path with that one, because there was never any shortage of orders with that, like with the Regent, really. I remember visiting the company one day right at the height of Imperial production, and it was incredibly busy. A modest production line of hand-built vehicles in various stages of completion, and not to mention rows of old London taxis sitting outside, just all lined up, just awaiting their fate, really. It was at this time that with Dave's encouragement, to design a modern take on the three-wheeler theme, which arrived in the form of I can only say the brilliant Razor. Absolutely brilliant. Everybody loved it. Dave was over the moon with it. Looked set fair, but then again, John was never really. I mean, he'd shown his versatility and his ability to design pretty much anything. And when sort of people raved over the styling, John had done it, I think, and he didn't really understand the fuss that it caused, and he didn't. I don't think he just wasn't his style of vehicle. But regardless of that, he certainly deserves much credit for that car. Remember, their demonstrator had a Suzuki Hayabusa engine in it. Weighed virtually nothing, but by crikey, what a car that was. And I think writing this 17 years later, it should have sold by the hundreds, but it wasn't long before the parting of the ways, and John and Dave went their separate ways. John wanted to concentrate on his core sort of period 20s and 30s style vehicles, really, and Dave was looking to sort of develop the Razor. But then we move on again. John then 2016, after a close shave with the Razor, and I don't apologise, that was deliberate, and I think that's quite good. He then visited his traditional market again, and we have the arrival of the Viscount Motor Company. Certainly John again was welcomed back with open arms. The wedding market really couldn't get enough of his cars, really. This one was different slightly in as much as it moved on with donor. Still London Taxi LTI, but this one was a TX1. This one had larger wheels and a longer bonnet, but once again he soon had a waiting list, and I think his waiting list at that time grew to 2 years very quickly. But I think he was impressed by the fact that he'd done it again, buoyed by the response, not to mention the orders. But he ultimately wanted to work less, I think, than and not carry around that sort of order book. And John's always been very brutally honest about his projects. I mean, he makes no bones about that. And when he felt that it was time to move on, he moved them on. And once again, he felt, I think, that the Viscount popularity was waning slightly. And he told me once that he felt that everyone who wanted one had one. Sold it to a company who I think called Inchmere. They were called Inchmere, who I think had an association with before by building chassis cab units for them for various other projects. And they didn't need to achieve the volumes that John had to, so that was a nice little business for them to take on, really. But even though he wanted to take it sort of more quietly, I don't think there was any chance or prospect of John wanting to sit down and watch Countdown every day. He definitely was looking to semi-retire, I think he called it. And when COVID came along, he, much like many other sort of kit car enthusiasts and specialist car fans, took to our garages, really. If we were locked down, we got out in the garage, I think. I certainly did. And John fancied what he called a lockdown project, and he fancied something based around his beloved Bentley. So he fancied a Mark 6 Bentley, and he fancied a restoration project. But he couldn't find the quality of vehicle that met his requirements. And you know what's coming. So obviously he could do better, so he did. And to be honest with you, I'm of the view that the series of Bentley and Jaguar inspired Grand Tourers that John has built in recent years, and he's still building, are really amongst the finest cars he has ever produced, and I mean that with really genuinely mean that. I think the kit car stuff that he did was a means to an end. It proved his skills, obviously, but this enabled him to really show he wasn't building them in volume, and it enabled him to do what he wanted and to produce the car that he really wanted, rather than the car that he had to produce, really, I think. And it's saying something, because he has produced some beautiful cars, as we've highlighted, and the photos you'll see here will confirm. And as he told me a while back, he builds them for himself, these sort of Grand Tourers, and once he completes them, he's enjoyed doing them. He's got I think a friend who runs a company called the Real Car Company in Gwynedd in North Wales, and they specialise in sort of period limousine type vehicles, and they've definitely got a passion for sort of old rollers and Bentleys, and so they tend to go into their showroom, and I think they sell very quickly. One of his more recent cars was a Jaguar Coupe, and one of the Real Car Company's partners actually bought that one for himself. I think he built 2, maybe 3 of those, and certainly one of his most recent is a Riley, rebodied Riley. Excuse me. And I think that keeps John very busy, and he's very happy doing what he's doing. I would never say there wouldn't be, there's no chance of another volume Barlow car, but I don't think there will be. But I think we can all enjoy looking at the wonderful vehicles that he produces in smaller numbers. And I hope you enjoyed that one. So thanks very much for visiting again. I hope you've enjoyed that one. As I said earlier, we've got aiming for one a week on these, usually a Tuesday, usually about 7:45. So please come back again next time. Wherever you are in the world, I hope you're having a great day. And thanks for visiting. My name's Steve Hull, and I wish you a good day.
while you're watching, why not give us a thumbs up? It doesn't hurt you and it helps us enormously. Even better, click on the bell. Click on the drop down and click on all. And that will tell you when another video is about to drop. Now, Steve already mentioned JBA because obviously John Barlow was the B in JBA and a very important part of a triumvirate of fantastic, really, really nice blokes. The other two worked with him to create JBA, and Steve is about to tell you the JBA story.
And another good one. I always say that, but this one is a good one, genuinely good one. It's kind of the sister, I wouldn't call it a part 2 or anything like that, but it's kind of a sister voiceover to the one we did on John Barlow recently. And I now realise that these aren't in chronological order, so you're going to have to search for that one. But you will find it. And it's a company called JBA Engineering, which is why it's linked with John, because of course John was the B of JBA. But we'll just quickly I've got to get cracking on these because I've been told I have to try and aim for 30 minutes. I don't think I'll achieve it. Well, I might with this one actually, but we're going to try and go through it and get it done, and that's the way we should do it. No waffling, no mucking about, as he proceeds then to waffle. JBA Engineering, great, a really good top table kit car mark, deserving of their place in history. The Falcon's one of the top kit cars ever made since 1949. 2,000 plus sales in its various guises. And in Ken Jones and Dave Ashley, two of the nicest blokes you could ever wish to meet. Let's just start at the beginning, really, but and cover their 22-year history. Unbelievably, and I worked it out the other day that they've been gone for 21 years. They've been gone for almost as long as they were in existence, and they seem like an institution for the industry while they were around. So it's amazing how time flies. But anyway. It was they all worked at Leyland Motors, which was the bus and truck arm of British Leyland, up in Leyland in Lancashire, where they all hail from. We'll start with Barlow. He designed the Falcon Roadster, which was the first incarnation of the Falcon. But he left soon after to set up first Top Form Engineering, which specialised with his wife Anne in restoring Jaguar XJ6s and producing GRP panels for them, or parts for them, such as new bonnets, new wings, flared wings, front splitters, rear diffusers, that sort of thing, which was all the rage in the early 80s. But that left Ken Jones and Dave Ashley, the J and the A, to continue running JBA, which they did pretty successfully until in 2004 they decided they wanted to retire. And should actually sort of landmark this one, really. I'm recording this in late September 2025. And when the Falcon Roadster appeared, it caused quite a stir, really, and it's just a quality traditional roadsters. At that time, the industry was awash with traditional roadsters. We've always been very fond of that style of car in our industry. I guess the obvious sort of reason for that would be the Morgan Motor Company and the quality products that they produce, and the long waiting lists, and sometimes people finding them sort of out of reach financially. And that sort of was the sort of reason that sparked a lot of kit car companies producing traditional roadsters. But the Falcon was one of the most successful. There's no two ways about that, really. So when John left, Ken and Dave from their Standish near Wigan base pressed on. Now the first dozen Falcons, which was known as the Roadster then, I think they had steel bodies with glass fibre wings, After I think about a dozen, the body style was switched to a sort of all aluminium body, including doors, but still retaining GRP's use for the wings. I remember the Roadster. Now, it's easy to sort of think that all the Roadsters are the same, and there is definitely a deliberate family resemblance, but that's not the case. We'll go through each model here, and we'll try and highlight as best we can which the differences between them, and give an approximate sales figure, sort of guesstimate. And I'm always conscious to pay respect in these videos where there's an owners club. And with the JBA Owners Club are a great bunch. They are really enthusiastic. They love their cars. Indeed, I don't think I've ever seen a badly built JBA Falcon. I really haven't. And that says a lot. People want to build nice cars, make the best job they can, and the quality of the kit lent itself to that aim, really. And the JBA Owners Club really are the font of all knowledge for all things Falcon. And let's not forget Javelin as well, but we'll come to that. So they know everything about everything, but upon everything about JBA. So if I do make a faux pas here and there on this voiceover, I wish them well, and I wish them to wish me well, and not to come and punch me in the kneecaps or anything like that. But I remember the Roadster, the first Falcon. It had a sort of a distinctive bonnet arrangement. When it was open, it seemed to open at the rear and the front, and it had a kind of a crocodile look to it, I think, which is the best way to describe it. But it was based on full Cortina mechanicals, and it's identifiable by being well, not a lot smaller, but if you saw it parked next to a later version, it definitely looks smaller in dimension. And it also had a near vertical windscreen, I think. No boot on that, no opening rear boot lid, because that's where the fuel tank lived at that time. Power options were as per donor, really, so Ford 4-cylinder all the way. Although Essex V6s were an option, and I think some people even fitted Rover V8s. And between 1982 and 1985, I would hazard a guess about 200 JBA Falcon Roadsters were sold. Replacing the Roadster in 1985 was the Plus 2. I think by demand really, people wanted the two-seat Roadster was popular, obviously, but people that had families wanted to take those younger family members with them. So I think by public demand they created a Plus 2 with a small bench seat in the rear that could accommodate young children quite easily, and perhaps small adults, although it wasn't intended to be a let's drive the Falcon to Germany in a day rear seat arrangement. It was just a 2+2 occasional rear, really, and an ideal for children. Now this one had a steel body frame with body panels still in aluminium, and GRP for the wings. It also had an opening boot lid. They rearranged that kit so that the boot lid opened sort of conventional boot lid type style, and you could put stuff in from the rear. The Plus 2 can be identified. I think it had a new windscreen that actually is hard to explain on a non sort of visual video, but the windscreen sat atop the scuttle, which was then bolted, and it was bolted directly to the top of it. Bonnet was now a more conventional sort of traditional Roadster centre hinged affair, and you could open both sides of that bonnet. But the donor vehicle remained full Cortina. This one sold very well, about 370. Dave Ashley told me once. 1985 to 1998 was that car's availability. So in 6 years of existence, that company's up to nearly 600 kit sales. Good going by any stretch of yardstick, really. 1988 came the Sports, which was a return to a two-seater configuration. And as the name implies, this was intended to be more sportier looking, hence the name. And it was definitely lower, more squat, more of a sort of more, I guess, an aggressive stance, if that's the right word, and smaller. And it was notable for being the first Falcon to feature what JBA Engineering called the CBU. That's not something down your local infirmary. That's actually what they defined, sort of described as a central body unit. And it was a strengthening, I guess, went straight down the middle of the body or the chassis, and it was made the structure more rigid. And it was a very cleverly designed piece of kit, that. Visually, the Sports could be identified. It definitely had a shorter windscreen in keeping with the sportier theme. And the giveaway is 3 wipers. Although I think all Falcons after that, at that point, I think you can safely say if you see a Falcon with 3 wipers, it's not going to be a +2 or a Roadster. Excuse me. I always remember someone saying to me when I did this, don't go to record a video for more and speak for more than 10 minutes without the need for liquid, and they were absolutely dead right. Anyway, just had a swig of water. My first one, that'll be first of many probably. That was available, the Sports, from 1988 to 2001. I would suggest over 275 of them found homes in kit form. In 2001 we had the arrival of the Tourer. This was a direct replacement for the +2, really, and again was introduced because they still had a demand for a larger Falcon, and this one did meet that brief because I have to try and do this in metric as well, because I realised that not all of our readers are from the UK. So I would say it was 15 inches longer from memory, which is certainly something like, what, 35 centimetres, something like that. And that was 15 inches longer than the Sports model. Genuine 2+2 capability, although customers could, I think, order it in 2-seater form as well if they chose, which was quite a nice sort of option for those that wanted the traditional 2-seat Falcon, in albeit in larger form, really. This one, again, the windscreen was more sloped, and again it had 3 wipers. Again, every model of the Falcon seems to have piled in with a really sort of solid number of sales, and I think 260, 265 will be a fairly safe guesstimate for the Tourer. Again, apologies to the Owners Club if they think I'm talking complete twaddle, but some of these figures are kind of what Dave Ashley told me, and Ken, going back a few years. Then we have a very notable, I think all Falcons are notable obviously, but there's a couple that are definite sort of sticks in the ground or flagpoles in the ground that denote a real notable sort of development. And the Falcon SR, or SRI in its Mark II, shall we say, guys, was just such a car. First one to be based on Ford Sierra donor. Styling obviously was very similar to all the others. You could tell a Falcon easily, which is a good thing. There was a change, obviously, I guess, due to the change of donor to the CBU unit, and also the chassis, and so could be considered a major change in Falcon land. Visually, I think it was pretty much identical to the Sports model. The SRI version that came slightly later, that added an opening boot lid because they went without the boot. The fuel tank was in the boot on the original one, but had a more sloping grille as well. And at the same time, they revised the interior. There was always, I think, from the earlier Falcons, if you had a complaint, larger drivers, and I consider myself to be a bigger bear, you could struggle a little bit with, well, I found elbow room, and it wasn't terrible, but it was noticeable for me. And with the arrival of the Tourer in 1990, that helped with that, and that was continued thereafter with the SR and the later TSR. We're coming to that. Around about 270 again, I think it's safe to say, of SRI. We then come to what I guess lots of people would consider to be the ultimate Falcon, the TSR. It was a Tourer, I guess it was a Tourer version of the SR, if for want of a better sort of description. use the same Ford Sierra donor, and this one could be ordered in either 2+2 or 2-seat, straight 2-seat if you preferred. There was another big change to the central body unit, and it was made taller, longer and wider, and this one also added much better legroom, and for the first time really took sort of 6'5" drivers could be accommodated in a Falcon, which they probably couldn't, well, almost definitely couldn't in some of the earlier versions. And again, elbow room was also greatly improved too. Got a larger boot, so it was more practical, and the fuel tank size or capacity was increased, if I'm not mistaken. That one arrived, but going back to Falcon SR 1991 to the end of JBA in 2005, 2004, late, well, depending on when you consider to be the cut-off point. So it could be early 2005, or you could say 2004 with the sort of departure of Jones and Ashley. So yeah, so I guess the TSR could be considered to be the sort of ultimate, I think, in terms of JBA Falcon. Over 300 of the TSR found homes. Dave told me 310 actually, so I've got no reason to disbelieve. Let's just slightly sort of go up a different rail for a second. Got to mention the Javelin model. I wasn't sure when to sort of fit this one in. It appeared in 1985, was stuck around until 1989, and it was a total departure, different concept completely to the Falcon. And this was, I guess, a body conversion, although it used its own sort of bespoke rugged, and it was a rugged ladder frame chassis. Based on Capri Mark II or even Mark III. I guess these days people would have based it on a donor vehicle and called it a conversion. They wouldn't have bothered making a chassis for it. But back then, and Dave really believed strongly in the Javelin, and it had that old laundrette rear body section. If you haven't heard the John Barlow voiceover yet, I relayed a story when a few years ago we had a young lady doing some sub-editing for us, and a fine job she did too. But I think I was away one day when the mag was just being, this particular feature was being signed off for press, and she saw that I'd written the word Landaulette, Landaulette, figured that I'd made a spelling faux pas, and I couldn't, and I just got laundrette spelt wrong, and she changed it to laundrette, so that was quite embarrassing. But so we'll say that the Javelin had a laundrette rear body section. It was much more actually than a Capri with a roof chop. It was a complex build though, and as I said, it was Dave Ashley's baby really. And I think in the 4 years they've made 55 of those, perhaps certainly over 50. Never, in no way, was it a rival in terms of sales performance to the all-conquering Falcon, really. It was late 2003 when Dave Ashley announced at a show, maybe the Exeter show that year, which was October, November, and he announced that he and Ken had decided to retire, and they were looking for a suitable buyer to take the marque forward into the future. And I no doubt that those 22 years they'd had a really good go. They'd been absolutely brilliant representatives for themselves, the company and the kit car industry, and just really nice guys. I can hand on heart say that Dave and Ken were just lovely guys. I had the pleasure of some social evenings in hotels after shows with them, and they were just really good company. So it was quite a notable thing for them to announce that they were sort of wanting to depart the scene. Anyway, in 2000, within a few months into 2004, the spring of 2004, I think they sold the JBA operation to a nice chap called Tim Banwell, and they'd agreed to stay on to facilitate a smooth sort of changeover of owners. Tim continued to trade from their base in Standish, however. And speaking to Tim at that period, he was a really nice chap. He understood the market. I he had his own ideas on what he wanted to do, but he saw it as a the old sort of cliche that if it ain't broke, don't fix it, and he kind of had a good base on which to build. But for whatever reason, he was gone within a year. He decided to move on to pastures new. I pass no judgment on that. That's just what happened, really. And I've heard that some people have said that post Dave and Ken, there were no JBA Falcons were sold or any kits, in fact. So I don't know if that's true or not. But Tim was certainly a nice chap. And whenever I spoke to him over the period that he had the company, he was always enthusiastic about it. But whether an alternative business opportunity came along, who knows? And it's 2005 when the JBA shutter doors in Standish in Lancashire near Wigan closed for the final time, which was a sad day, really, for a great mark. Although the story doesn't end there. Interestingly, about 6 years later, a hitherto JBA Falcon owner, a guy called Bill Wilcock, a Norwich-based businessman, very successful businessman in Norfolk, announced that he was going to bring out a new version, revised version of the Falcon, and he intended to base it on BMW 3 Series E36 from memory, although he said that the 46, the later variant, could also be used as a donor. He began developing that car, I think, in 2008. His main business was security shredding and a recycling operation, I think, and he was very successful at that. Really nice chap. Drove his demonstrator, which appeared in 2011. I was very impressed with it. Based on BMW, as I said, it was a really good car, and it seemed set fair for the future. There was no connection, as far as I'm aware, between Bill's JBA Motors and the old JBA Engineering. He had his son Matt, really nice young lad. He was kind of in charge or running the JBA Motors arm, and they seemed to be doing very well. They were getting plenty of inquiries. I think they'd sold a few in kit form, and I don't know whether it was due to the success, really, of Bill's mainline business that forced sort of the premature end of JBA Motors. I don't know. He based his Falcon BMW, shall we call it. It was more akin in visual terms, I think, to the original JBA Roadster, the Barlow car. But it used the same windscreen mounting method as the Plus 2 of 1998 that affixed to the top of the scuttle. And I really had a lovely afternoon touring the Norfolk lanes in Bill's demo car. I rated it highly. As I said, I'm not sure how many he produced, but it wasn't many, unfortunately, but it deserved to sell more. But just to sort of round up, I'm a big fan, remain a big fan of Dave, Ashley, Ken Jones. Not spoken to those guys for ages, and I hope they actually, someone makes them aware of this voiceover. Not sure if Dave or Ken, definitely not Ken, would be kind of an interweb fan. I don't think they were fans of new technology, but I hope someone points a phone at them and lets them listen to this, because it's meant with sort of real respect for them and what they achieved. Ken was a real craftsman, actually. Dave tended to look after the admin and marketing, although he was a dab hand in the workshop when he needed to be, of course, as well. I can't recall how many examples of the Falcon I've driven over the years. Lots. Certainly double figures. JBA Engineering always presented beautifully prepared demonstrators. That was very notable from them. And I think there's a reason why their customers love them. And indeed why I've never seen a badly built scruffy Falcon, as I said earlier. And thanks to the JBA Owners Club, you'll find them at all the W's, jbaoc.org.uk, and you can read all about all things Falcon there. They really do a great job keeping that name alive and guarding the company's well carved out legacy. Really lovely bunch of folks too. So I hope you've enjoyed that one, and looks like I've achieved my 30-minute aim, which will please Neil. I hope you enjoy looking at some of the photos Neil's put with this one. I hope you enjoy the subject matter indeed, and wherever you are in the world, I'm hoping you're having a really great day. Thank you so much sincerely for visiting our channel and giving us a time of a very valuable part of your day. It really is appreciated. I'm going to have a little nag. Less than 30% of viewers to this channel subscribe. If you subscribed, I'll be eternally grateful. It helps us more than you will ever know. But the best bit of all is it doesn't cost you a penny. I'm not even going to say it's costing you 1 penny. It's absolutely free. And if you got this far, it's the least you can do, surely, because even if you were looking for a curry recipe or how to shampoo your dog, and you've ended up with this in your feed, I'd like to think that you found it quite fascinating, our look at one little tiny element of the UK's kit car industry's history. So if you could also hit the like button on the way out, I'll be very grateful for that too. Anyway, I'll see you again soon, I hope, and have a great day. See you down the road. Steve Hull, over and out.
So, thank you for watching. I hope you've enjoyed the video. If you've reached this point, hopefully you have. I know I keep saying it, but it really does help us enormously if you give us a thumbs up. And even more so if you hit the bell. If you want to see more videos that aren't yet public, why not become a Patreon? That will help me to buy more camera equipment, to make more videos and improve the quality of the product that you see here. Our Patreon page is in the description below, and if you want to buy me a coffee, there's a link for that as well. Now, if you've enjoyed what you've seen today and you want to see more, why not click on one of the videos that's going to pop up on the screen anytime now. And we wish you all the best, and we will see you next time.